Hello, and welcome to Movies We Dig, the podcast about video games, antiquity, and everything in between. I'm Colin McCormick.
And I'm Elijah Fleming.
And I'm Christy Vogler.
And today we're digging up Hades, a rogue-like action dungeon crawler created by Supergiant Games and released in 2020. And also joining us today, something we've been sort of biting our tongues, holding back, but we're really excited with a wonderful special guest, Dr. Donna Zuckerberg, founder and editor-in-chief of Eidolon, also recently published author of Not All Dead White Men. Okay, make sure I read the book, like I should know this.
Yep, that's the name. Yeah, it's not so recently published anymore. It came out in 2018.
We're in strange times, and everything is, 2010 is to me recently published.
Fair enough. Recently published in Korean. That's new.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But we're joined here today by Donna Zuckerberg, and who really excited, and we've been meaning to talk about this game for basically since it came out. I know Christy and I have been talking about it. I've been trying to get Eli to play it. We'll follow up, but we'll start first with Donna. And yeah, do you dig this game, and how did you first come to Hades?
I dig everything about this game. Although the first time I played it, I actually bounced off of it. I tried it about I guess it wasn't quite a year ago because the game only came out about a year ago, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Probably earlier in 2021, I tried it, and I don't play a lot of action RPGs of this sort, at least not top-down ones. So I found the perspective a little bit weird. I'm more used to sort of like the Breath of the Wild, sort of back behind the main character view, or roguelikes that I play a lot of roguelikes. Most of them are deck builders. So yeah, I can talk extensively about the roguelike genre.
Good, because yes, that's
good.
Was also gonna.
Great, can't wait to get into that. So I knew that this game should be my jam, but for some reason, the first time I tried it, I just sort of bounced off of it because the dodging the enemy's hits was something that I couldn't get into. But then I decided to give it another try, and I fell in love. I don't know how to describe it. I love everything about it, and mostly, if I had to narrow it down to the top three things, it would be, the art, the voice acting, and the sort of playful approach to antiquity.
So I have my own personal player to do the dodging and hitting for me. So that was very advantageous, where I knew that Hades was coming out in 2020. And that was one of the things that my partner Andy and I were like, oh, that's something cool and nerdy we could stream together, because he will talk about all of the gaming aspects and like what's a good build and everything like that. And I would talk about the kind of classical reception that was happening in the background. So I got to brush up on Orphism and all of that jazz, which was pretty fun.
I was in the Oxford Classical Dictionary today reading up on Orphism.
Yeah, you could see that. You see my backdrop here. Well, we can go back to that later. But,
yes. Oh, I saw that too when you shared that one. I was like, oh, that's such an inside joke. And you have to be really into Greek myth to even kind of understand it, which was impressive. Like, I always appreciate people who are making classical material easily accessible to a new generation of people who may have not seen it before, but then still have something like very Easter egg for the people who have loved it and studied it for years. So I thought that was a really cool part of the game.
Should I describe what we're talking about for listeners?
Yes, go for it.
Yes, please.
An image that they're not actually seeing. Yeah, so the main character of the game is Zagreus, the son of Hades, and mild spoilers here for the game, Persephone. But for people who are more coming to this from a place of reading classical literature as opposed to video games, they're more likely to know Zagreus' name as Dionysus Zagreus, a specific version of Dionysus from the Orphic mystery cult, where Dionysus was torn apart and then reborn, sort of an early Jesus figure, you might say.
Or a late Osiris.
Late Osiris, there you go. Yeah, I like that. And there's a lot of Dionysus and Osiris overlap even outside of the Zagreus myth, which is a very niche myth, right? The Orphic mysteries, where this is a mystery cult, and Greek religion broadly sort of falls into two spheres. There's the worship of the gods, which was opt out at your risk, at extreme risk, as many myths tell the story of. And the mystery cults, which were opt in and get a better afterlife ? So having this game, which is all about the afterlife, bring in this element from a mystery cult is just so, chef's kiss. And I think that the moment that is in my backdrop here is when Dionysus, one of the Olympian gods, tells Zagreus that they should play a prank on Orpheus and tell him that they are actually the same person. And it blew my mind. It was the nerdiest, most classic mythology in joke that I could imagine seeing in a video game that was this successful.
I love it.
It's so
I just
good.
had a comment. Like, I went to a Catholic wedding a few years ago, and it'd been a long time since I'd sat through anything. And it was the rehearsal, and the priest was talking about Jesus's first miracle of like going to a wedding and turning water into wine. And I was just sitting there like, wait, he's Dionysus? Why did no one tell me?
And then the priest ripped apart the groom and put him back together.
Yeah.
That would have been great. I would have been much more entertained at that point.
There is a lot of Dionysus and Jesus stuff, though, right? With the being born of a mortal woman, and she's got this. I think that definitely has a lot of Mary parallels.
Definitely.
There's a whole, I remember learning about this. I took a Euripides seminar in grad school, but there's a whole, somebody like rewrote the Bacchae, a play by Euripides about Dionysus coming to town and convincing all of his followers to rip up the king. That's the sort of the TLDR version. There's more to it, but that somebody like rewrote the Bacchae to be like a Christ story or something like that. Like they took all the lines and just rearranged them or something like that to be like about Jesus. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but
yeah, oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's at the tip of my tongue. I'm sorry, but yes, I think it's interesting to bring in tragedy here a little bit as well, because the only source for Zagreus, son of Hades and Persephone, appears to be a fragment of Aeschylus Sisyphus and the scolion on it, which again, real deep cut classics nerd stuff.
Eli, you're also the one I'm most curious to hear from, because last I checked, Eli is a neophyte. She is uninitiated in the mysteries, so she has to be led through blind.
That's really exactly what I felt like, though, this week. I am not a big video game person. I never have been. It was just like not part of my childhood, and it has never been something that I was terribly interested in becoming better at. Like, perhaps to my own detriment. I realized it's a personal fault. And so I watched a lot of playthroughs of this, and I watched a lot of the storylines and did a lot of research on like the development. So I still have not played this game. So I feel like an imposter sort of being on the podcast talking about it. But I am so intrigued, I think is the word, because there's so much about this that I love and that I think is so cool. And so I do dig this, and I am actually tempted to try to play it, which says a lot for me.
We should start a Twitch stream for you, Eli.
Oh God, that would be so embarrassing. It would be so embarrassing.
Well, that's like kind of the beauty of this game, I think, is like, I mean, first of all, my sort of disclaimer is this game slaps, but everything that Donna said, the art, the design, the music, the aesthetic, and like my sort of thesis statement on this game is that it's kind of this amazing blend where like sort of source material meets medium meets execution, where like the myth that they bring in reinforces the style of the video game and the way they tell the story. And like this kind of story you could, I think, only tell in a game like this. You know, you couldn't make a movie out of Hades, or if you could, it would be hobbled in a lot. Like it wouldn't be the same as that experience where the mechanics of the game, the sort of living, dying, doing it again and again, is a way to tell the story, and also draws upon so sort of richly this tradition. And I think I had a larger point I was building to, but yeah, I think
that comes to sort of a question that I have for those of you who do play this game, is sort of what is it about the medium of it being so interactive and it being a video game versus something like, I don't want to say fan fiction, because I don't mean that in a derogatory manner. I mean that in like the best way.
Yeah. First of all, nothing against fan fiction. Yeah.
Oh, no,
yeah.
Love me.
All classical literature, as we established last week, is fan fiction.
This is true.
Yeah. That's
what is it
several
about?
articles about that topic on that one. Yes, I think that. So I think this sort of goes back to the genre we're literature scholars, or some of us are literature scholars. Are you guys all literature scholars?
Archaeologist.
Archaeology.
Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. Well,
But I'm here for it.
Colin and I are literature scholars, and the rest of you have had to deal with a lot of
Our bullshit.
Yes.
Aristotelian bucketing texts into increasingly smaller genre buckets. So this game is a roguelike game. Technically, it's a rogue-lite game, which means that it's built around runs, and you are not expected to win every run. Often you die and you start back at the beginning. And in rogue-lite version, you then get persistent currency. In this game, it's the darkness and gems and then some sort of higher value currency like Titan's Blood later on that you use to unlock upgrades that will then make higher level, more successful runs available later on. And it's just a super fun genre of game in general. There are tons of roguelikes that I really like. And what makes this one really special is how dying works. Now, normally as you progress through a roguelike, you get more persistent currency, so you unlock more things. As you get further, you level up or whatever, and you unlock more abilities, or your weapons get stronger, or whatever it is. You get more health, and then later runs you have more options, or it's a little easier. But with this game, every time you die, you end up back in the House of Hades, which for those of you who are not listening and are probably pretty confused by this point, I guess, about what we're talking about, the game is all about Zagreus trying to escape from the House of Hades, and you learn pretty on that it's because he wants to meet his long-lost mother, Persephone. And all the people in the House of Hades, well, the gods in the House of Hades and sort of deity-like figures, are a little bit skeptical of his plan, and some are pretty offended by it because they love him and are upset that he's trying to leave them behind. No spoilers. Although, personally, I hear that there's a polyamorous option later on that I've not seen the scene for it yet. And I really love how every time you die, you go back to the House of Hades, and your storyline and your interactions with the characters progresses. So you can only sort of have one conversation with them each time you're there. And then you have to go out, try to escape again, die, come back, or succeed, come back, and have another conversation. And your relationship with them can only progress through the run. So that's one thing that makes it really satisfying. Sometimes in other games, when you have a run that's going really well and it fails to click sort of 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through, it's so disappointing that you just want to scream. But with this game, because there are sort of rewards to dying, you get to start to see how the threads are coming through. Will I be able to, spoiler, reunite Orpheus and Eurydice? And you can only find out if you die. So.
Yeah. And it varies because every time, so like this is one of the other, like the things about a rogue game or a roguelike is like, whereas like a game like Mario or Mega Man or something like that, every level is the same every time and people, perfect it. Like the same Goomba walks out at exactly the same time in the same way. But in the roguelike, it's sort of a little bit randomly generated. Like the rooms you go into are not necessarily going to be the same every time. The enemies in there. And in this game, particularly, the abilities you get, which manifest in different gods, come down and give you their respective powers, and it's random. So there's a bit of randomness, like you have to change your strategy every time you go through based on what abilities you get. But then also the story changes on these random variables, because like you might have a chance of running into Eurydice on your run. It's not guaranteed, you might do it. And then when you come back after that, Orpheus is going to have something different to say, or somebody else. And like the things that people say when you get back to the House of Hades is different depending on what happened during your run. And even the most basic thing is Hypnos is basically the first person you see when you come out of the pool. Usually he's just kind of hanging out right there, and he's essentially like this like clerk who's like checking in the shade but always sleeping on the job because he's Hypnos, the manifestation of sleep.
He was so cool.
Yeah, and so, but he'll say stuff like, "Oh, like the Minotaur got you," or like the you were killed by this enemy. That's like maybe you should try dodging.
Killed by Redacted.
He just relentlessly dunks on you for however you died. Like, looks like you died on some spikes. Have you tried not standing on the spikes? I have died on spikes.
And then there's something like 22,000 lines of dialogue in this game, basically, that they wrote to sort of anticipate all these different combinations, because you might meet characters in a certain order, based on that random chance. Zagreus himself, who was voiced by Darren Korb, who also did the music and the voice editing and the sound mixing.
was
Yeah,
excellent.
he voiced Zagreus and Skelly, but
That
he
makes
alone
sense
has
to me.
something like about 9,000 lines of dialogue. And then I think the next most character is Hades, who has about 1,000.
Mm.
And that's voiced by Logan Cunningham, I believe. I have all the credits right here, who won a Game Awards for this performance.
One of the things that was always really funny to me, because like I said, I was watching Andy play, and Andy would say something, and then Zagreus would come in right behind that and say almost the exact same thing. And so I started to get creeped out after a while, being like, who am I engaged to exactly? And should I be winning?
That sounds great though. It's like somebody actually playing and like actually thinking the things out loud. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, and he was coming at it without the Greek mythology background, which was really interesting in terms of I understand all the dynamics. So, one of my favorite things is that sometimes there are gods who have natural conflict between the two. And so sometimes you actually have to fight over which power you're going to take. And I would like point out, like, it never clicked for Andy why you would have to fight over these powers sometimes. I'm like, oh, I can explain exactly why those two are at it right now. And that was really fun to point
I
those
love that
things out.
dynamic. I thought that, yeah, the Trial of the Gods dynamic with the speed with which the god gets furious that you didn't choose them and immediately retaliates, and then the speed with which the god gets over it and says, oh no, we're all good now, just seemed to me to be so consonant with the pettiness and capriciousness of the gods from everything that we see in myth. So that I thought was so on the nose. Yeah, I got so later in the game, if you have certain boons from two different gods, you can get duo boons, which combine them. And sometimes when you pick up the duo boons, the two gods will actually talk. And the other day I got one with Athena and Artemis, which was apparently my first time getting the conversation between the pair. I've gotten Athena and Artemis duo boons before, but they had nothing to say to each other. Yeah, Athena says something along the lines of, so I guess one of my siblings is also helping you. And then Artemis says something like, yeah, I'm not really sure why we're doing this here. And then, they just have nothing, which I thought was really funny in a way because, there are not a lot of myths that involve the two of them. There are sort of resonances as very different virgin goddesses, but.
Oh, so there's so many things I want to just to get into it. It's something I wanted to say about the mechanics, but it's escaped my mind. But mostly just this game is really good. I was going to say this game is really good about avoiding, like Donna said, you first bounced off to it. Like, it's a very common feeling when you play video games to sort of rage quit, or you fail at something so many times and you get super frustrated and you drop the game. And I bounce off of games pretty hard for, sometimes that reason. And because the impetus behind this was the previous game Supergiant Games made was called Pyre, and it had all these branching narratives where there's, depending on the choices you made of the game, there was like a bajillion different endings, but they were finding that the players were actually only playing it through once. So they wanted to find a way to sort of encourage multiple playthroughs to explore all the different possibilities. And then they they conceived of the idea of doing something like Greek mythology, and originally it was going to be called Minos, and it was going to be in the labyrinth with the Minotaur and Theseus. And then they sort of, and particularly the sort of creative director, Greg Kasavin, kind of found that idea, basically they run into this problem that we were talking about on our prior episodes, that heroes like Theseus or Perseus or Jason very quickly run the risk of becoming a bit bland very quickly, because they're these kind of baseline prototype heroes. And then also they couldn't find a way to sort of incorporate the dying, redying. So then Kasabin comes upon this character of Zagreus and realizes that there's more or less a blank slate. We have some Orphic texts and some vague references to some myths, and it's loosely connected to this Persephone myth, maybe, which is kind of the perfect sort of canvas to kind of work this narrative. And then it becomes essentially like, if you've ever played Diablo, where the premise of that game is you try to go down into hell and you're trying to get further down into hell every time. This is the reverse of Diablo. You're trying to get up out of hell. But also, I was going to say, hell falls into the kind of schema is like hell. There's basically 3 levels of, or I guess 4 levels of hell. You start in Tartarus, then you go to Asphodel, then you go into Elysium, and then you are, I guess, kind of at the gates. And there's a different sort of boss associated with each level.
Yeah, I mean, that 3-act structure is very classic for roguelikes. So the game that I think is often attributed with the beginning of the roguelike renaissance that we're seeing now is a game called Slay the Spire, which is a deck builder. And it has the same 3-act structure with a boss at the end of each act, although there are a few different options for bosses there, which you do ultimately see. At least you sort of see it right there. You see the different furies, and you see different versions of Lerny. Right? There's the Lerny that spits the laser arcs at you, and the Lerny that has the bone spurs that turn into little skeletons. Different iterations of the same basic mechanic, though. But yeah, do we want to talk about the Furies? The Furies are fantastic. Megra, I think, is also probably my favorite character. She's so fully fleshed.
I'm looking at my notes of Avalon Penrose is the voice actor. Part of it, I think, for me is just Megaro's voice, like, gets under your skin or something like that. It's like there's something so magnetic about the whole thing, which also makes sense because there's also that element is that you can romance Megara as you sort of progress through the game. And so it's got that, like, there's that dual edge to your relationship with Megara, because I think you also start off as Zagreus, is that you've effectively had you've broken up. Like, you start off as exes, which is in many ways like a terrifying prospect.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the breakup between Zuko and May. Yeah, it's like, it's very much that dynamic of like, you're so great together and yet so terrifying.
And part of and I think at every level, the theme that this game really plays off of, and I think which is really kind of so brilliant about the storytelling, is that this game is really about family. Like the mega arc is Zagreus sort of reconnecting his family, because the sort of larger plot that plays out is him reconciling Hades and Persephone and the Olympians. But then at the micro level, there's all these different family sub-dynamics that plays out, and Megara is one of them, where you're kind of learning the relationship between Megara and her various sisters, and we sort of find out that her other sisters aren't even let into Hades' house because they're
very difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. One only ever says murderer.
Honestly, any run where I see Electo, I'm like, come on.
Yeah, and Zagreus usually has the same reaction as you. I was like, I was hoping for the other one.
Anyone else.
Literally any other one.
any of the other ones. Yeah.
Not Electo and her spinny razor of doom.
Yeah.
I'm making it sound like I'm bad at this game. I actually am. I'm pretty decent at this game, guys.
I wrote down my stats to brag about later, but we can share that for the end. No, later. But actually, I started a new game just earlier this week, and I was suffering because I'd gotten pretty far in one, and then I came back. I'm like, oh right, the beginning is hard again. And then just last night, on like a whim, I picked it up after not playing for a few days, and then I had yet to get past like Fury, and then just like Don was saying, all the stars aligned, and I made it through Electo and then the Hydra, and then I made it about halfway through Elysium, just on like one like big run, and it felt really good.
I think because Andy did a fresh save file as well, and surprisingly, he actually got to Theseus in Elysium, and I thought he was going to die for sure at the Furies, because like, that's a gamer for you, I guess. So that was very impressive as far as I could tell.
That's impressive. No, I only started playing this game like, I don't know, a month and a half ago. So yeah, but I've been thinking about starting a fresh save file. I'm concerned.
This game is beloved by speedrunners, as you could understand, of people that really like to sort of perfect this kind of thing. And then as I learned, there's different kinds of speedruns, like ones where you can have access to all your late game things, but then the fresh save files, you just start a new fresh game, and then on your very first run, see if you can get through to the end. And I watched a guy on his first sort of totally blank slate get all the way to the end in 25 minutes, which is just insane.
We learned something from that, actually.
The fresh save speedrunning record is. I'm sure it's under 20 minutes.
It's something like that. I also learned the creators, Amir Rao and Greg Kasavan, who are the sort of directors of the game, were sort of commenting on this file, and they were saying that their best runs were something like 20 minutes, and then the best player on their team, like in Supergiant Games, is Darren Korb, the music and voice actor, and he has like 12-minute run or something like that.
Wow. Do you know what aspect of what weapon? Now
I do not. Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm curious myself.
Yeah. Speedrunners seem to really love the versions of the weapons that move you around the room a lot. So like aspect of Beowulf on the shield, and aspect of Achilles on the spear.
I really like the Gilgamesh one, the one that gives you like lion paws. I really liked that one.
I also am partial to the gloves, but I like the magnetic cutter, the aspect of Talos.
We like we call them the Fists of Fury. That's the move most of the time.
I call them the fists of much wailing upon.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, because that's your move. You just get in there and wail on them, right?
Well, and the thing with the speed run we learned, and I thought that was quite adorable, is like you have the option to hug Hades when he's doing one of his attacks and you don't take damage, and you actually are like, you can do damage to him. And I'm like, oh, we just learned something new. You should hug your dad and you might beat him in this
I have
fight.
not managed to make that move work perfectly.
I tried it.
I've tried, but it is hard.
Yeah, it doesn't work for me, but I'm not that good, so.
That's wild.
But if you just get a good enough Athena build up, you can basically just stand next to him and take it.
Eli, I think you had something, and then I had a question for the group.
So one of the things that I read about in like people reviewing this game is that just the strange combination of different boons and like abilities and bonuses that you can have varies so much that it could literally like you surprise yourself in how far you could get with something that you may not think is that great. Like, are there some where you, if you take damage, then you can deal more damage, which sounds like a D&D metric.
There's all this is basically my question I was going to ask is what all of our favorite sort of combinations of weapons and gods and things, and particularly what gods we really like the most.
Oh yeah,
because each god kind of has their own different flavor. Like Athena's boons tend to be about defense, and like they let you reflect attacks or take less damage. Or Zeus's, predictably, a lot of his abilities let you shoot lightning bolts or variations of that. And I'm actually really partial to Artemis, who her attacks let you like you crit on people, or like it increases your chances to do critical damage. And also Ares, because Ares has a lot of like sort of damage dealing things.
Mine depend on the weapon. I don't know about you guys, but for the gloves, I love a good sort of Athena and Aphrodite, like where you special like get weak on them and then just start wailing on them and deflecting their attacks back. And that's sort of my go-to there. I love Ares with the bow, especially if you can get an Aphrodite duo where you get, because their duos, your doom hits weak enemies continuously. So if you can get, your doom all the way up, the things where like doom hits less frequently but for more, and then you get doom hits continuously, suddenly you're just doing tons of doom damage. So those are some of my favorites. But what other people like?
I have to speak for Andy, and I have watched him play it enough that I think I understand a few. He's a big dasher, so he loves anything that deals damage while doing dash or a backstep. So I know Hermes is usually a big go-to. He likes the fog move that Dionysus can give him as well. And then I think his favorite call is Poseidon. He uses that to his advantage a lot.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I love a good Poseidon run, but my favorite call is Aphrodite. Just
hers is good too. Yeah, hers is really good.
The face.
Yeah. And it's funny also, like this is probably why I'm a bad player, because I tend to avoid Hermes, because most of Hermes' abilities just sort of let you move faster, which I guess is really good when you're already really good at the game, but I kind of need all the help I can get when I play. But my follow-up question is, independent of the abilities to get, who are our favorite gods to interact with and playing out that story, and what do we like about those?
Dionysus, hands down, I think. Hi.
Hey, Zagman.
Yeah, he's so chill. Yeah, he's always so happy he's always so positive. I really like his vibes. Zeus and Poseidon always get on my nerves.
Mm-hmm.
They sounded very condescending in like the brief things that I read. And also Zagreus didn't seem to be seemed surprised in some of the things that I watched and read.
They're related to his dad, so that probably doesn't.
Yeah, it's like Uncle Zeus. Okay. Which I love the snark. There was so much like snark coming out of Zagreus that I was just like, yes, I love like not like an anti-hero, but like just a snarky, kind of mean, sarcastic hero. At
the very beginning of the game, his impetus is kind of F you dad. Like that's kind of his energy. He's like he almost a sort of like prep school kid who like trashes his room and goes out on the lam or something. Like that's kind of the energy from Zagreus. And the Zeus thing, I think there's this family rift between Hades and his brothers in particularly, and the way I think they really hit the nail on the head with Zeus, where he sort of pompous, and very sure of himself, but also like completely kind of self-involved. And like there's things that he says frequently throughout the game where like you actually know as a player that he's just acting on misinformation, but just sort of assumes that things are correct or you know, like always thinks he's kind of in the right. And Zeus is a person who is completely confident in their own sort of choices and their correctness and like never stops to think about it.
He has sort of a white man who failed up vibe.
Yes.
But chaos is one of my favorites to try.
That's who I was going to say.
Chaos is delightful.
I never encountered chaos. I'm gonna have to go back.
Everything about their vibe.
Well, and I love that they were using they pronouns to talk about chaos too. Like I thought that was such a cool integration of, yeah, that's exactly how you would describe chaos in the language and everything like that. And I think that's why I liked those interactions as well. And then I loved Dionysus was my favorite, but Aphrodite was a lot of fun because she's just very flirty the whole time. It's like, but you're related, but I know that stops none of you, so never mind.
There are a few that I'm sad that they didn't include.
Yeah. Like I had to ask again because they don't have Apollo, which maybe
Apollo
and Hera.
They don't have Hera. And I think most glaringly, they don't have Hephaestus, right? They have Daedalus hammers, which do cool things to your weapons. But having Hephaestus feels like it would have been a really big opportunity for a whole new set of dynamics, especially, I mean, this game is great on representation and diversity in general, but there is no disability representation. So,
yeah.
And Hephaestus is really important there.
I'm curious too, like, because clearly, like in this game that is considering Hypnos and Thanatos and Chaos and gods like that, and I think there was a deliberate choice, like they really wanted to depict gods and deities that had never really been depicted before. Like, to my knowledge, I don't think we ever see a depiction of Chaos in modern media, and maybe Hypnos and maybe Thanatos, but not in the same way that, like, I mean, you how many depictions of Zeus have there been in the last 50 years, something like that, in games or movies or whatever. And so, you know, like for something like Chaos, like they really could do kind of anything with the design. And I was watching in this No Clip documentary that when they did the voice for Chaos, I think they had it's Peter Canavesi, but multiple voices, and it's male and female voices simultaneously, and it has that layery echo effect, which makes complete sense in going with the they them pronouns and with going with the fact that like Chaos is literally, you know, everything. But yeah, at some point they probably just to say like somebody's got to be on the chopping block. And so, and I'm kind of glad that I think they took Artemis and not Apollo, because I feel like in a sort of maybe lazy or a less thoughtful game, they would have gone with Apollo sort of without questioning. Every god, like the more conversations you had with every god, the more you kind of get to explore their personality and also like various relations. Like there's a rapport between Hermes and Charon, and there's a rapport between Artemis and Achilles, and all these other characters, and that sort of get fleshed out as you play over the game. And Zeus and Poseidon are another one, but they have this kind of like jovial blowhard uncle, but like Donna was saying, like sort of like just a white guy who's never been wrong.
I do love Artemis. I love her. She's always talking about what a misfit she feels like on Olympus and how she'd rather be out hanging out with Callisto and hunting. And it's great. I really feel that vibe.
What about Nyx? Because like she's actually one of my favorites, and she like that's another entity that we don't really think about being visually shown as an anthropomorphic person, because she is one of these earlier entities, one of the first to come from chaos. But like I actually always really liked her in mythology as well, as just kind of what she represented.
She's so her art is so stunning.
Yeah, I would say everything about her style.
With the hair, with the stars under the hair and everything. Yeah, and I love how they make her both very enigmatic and very maternal. That felt exactly right.
And a little bit of spoilers, but towards the end, like in the very later game, once you've reconnected with Persephone, there's also a rapport between Persephone and Nyx, and the tension, because again, the family theme and the unconventionalness of this family in so many ways, but the sort of, not necessarily tension, but this anxiety between Persephone and Nyx, as Persephone as Zagreus' birth mother, but Nyx as his mother who has effectively raised him. And we learn sort of spoilers for those who haven't gotten that far in the game, but Nyx essentially brought Zagreus back to life, again in an homage to the myth that we were talking about at the beginning, and to raise Zagreus. And so this tension between Zagreus effectively has two mothers, and reconciling that relationship. There's a lot to sink your teeth into with that.
I did love that. I thought it was a fun twist on how in mythology, there are often two fathers. There,
Mhm.
there's often with heroes, there's the divine father and the human father. Theseus as Aegeus and also Poseidon, and or Heracles, who
Mhm.
it's funny that they like mention Heracles a few times, and it's like, yeah, but we're not going to do that in this game. He's
We're
the
not
jerk
going
who
there.
came and stole our dog. um, by the way, Cerberus, what a delight.
Oh,
I loved
yeah.
him. That was almost my background.
Everybody's
Yeah.
petting Cerberus, right? You got to pet Cerberus.
Oh, always give Cerberus the pets. Yeah, the
Mhm.
first time I saw Cerberus, I was so concerned I was gonna have to fight him. Although when Cerberus comes running through on extremer measures Hades, it's just
Mhm.
I haven't figured out. Is there a way to dodge that move? Can you dodge his Cerberus call?
No, I don't know. I haven't run into that one, but I haven't played in a minute, and I haven't gotten to Hades in a while.
Yeah, well, on the extremer measures pact of punishment, the one that makes the bosses harder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there are 4 levels of it, right? There's the one that brings in multiple Fury Sisters, and then you're fighting Lerny in the sort of lava river intersected room, and Theseus and Asterius.
I want to talk about them later.
Let's
but
not talk
yeah,
about that. Yeah, should be Asterion. Come on, guys. Theseus and Asterius. Eye roll. I mean, Theseus should get all the eye rolls because that character is
Yes.
so delightfully cringy.
Yeah.
Is.
What a nightmare. he's talk about blowhard.
In a way, like he's kind of my favorite character for that reason, because he's like such a great send up of that.
He's so obviously the worst character that like
Yeah.
by such a mile that
Mhm.
that he becomes fun.
Again, a perfectly completely convinced of their own sort of self-righteousness.
Exactly.
He was almost the hero of this game.
Yeah. Well, he thinks he's the hero of this game.
Yeah.
And I love the trial of the gods. I love the moment in your fight with him where you both have the gods on your side.
Oh, yeah.
It really reminded it had to me a kind of Bacillity 17 vibe where he and Minos are facing off and they have their godfathers help them out in various ways.
I love it.
So in the upgraded version of your fight with Hades, there is a point where Cerberus runs through and just rains destruction down.
Oh, but he's such a good boy.
He's
Oh,
a good
no.
boy. He's just doing what his master told him to do. Yeah.
Before we leave Tartarus, there's also one other character. I want to get to Asphodel and talk about Orpheus and Eurydice, but before that, Sisyphus, if we had any thoughts on him.
I love how happy he is.
Mhm.
That's the thing, right? The Camus, like one must imagine Sisyphus happy. This is a happy Sisyphus.
Mhm.
He's always so cheerful whenever you run into him.
I think I literally saw a tweet the other day. It's just like, what if Sisyphus just one day decided not to push the boulder up the hill? And I think this is what it would look like. He's like, oh, good, the Furies aren't around at the moment because you took care of them for me. Thanks, Zag. And well, yeah, let's chat for a bit. So I really liked that. Yeah, I mean, who's really, is Meg there with the whip, making sure he's pushing that boulder up the hill all day, every day? Or does, he get a little chance to chat and hang out for a bit?
Yeah, I get the sense that he still does some rolling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that seems to be, he seems to be very content with that as his lot in life, just him and Boldy.
Yeah,
love the
he's got this
smile.
whole like relationship with Boldy.
But you can
I
talk
love
to Boldy, right? After a while?
Yes, you can give Boldy ambrosia.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can Boldy nectar, not ambrosia.
Or nectar,
Ambrosia's
excuse me,
too expensive, yeah, and then Boldy gives you boons. He'll give you plus 5 move speed for the entire run or whatever. Yeah.
For me, it's always when I encounter Sisyphus on a run, it's always like this breath of fresh air of like, I just like need this guy in my life, just good vibes and like positivity. And considering like all of, and then he has bits later where he reflects on sort of like, I think one of the interesting aspects of this game is the way kind of death has transformed all of the particularly the mortal characters, which we only meet a handful, but the way death has transformed them, where Sisyphus has kind of had like almost an awakening or a nirvana moment or something like that, and he's kind of had this big breakthrough both about his life and like what he did while he was alive, and then now that he's in Tartarus receiving these punishments. And Achilles and Patroclus too are also the two that seem very simultaneously informed by the Achilles and Patroclus we get in, say, Homer or somewhere like that, but have grown since then in a way that is both appealing and believable.
One of the reviews that I read said that like death is not a failure, it's an opportunity to see old friends. And I really liked just that as a mechanic of, you get to see cool people and old friends and sort of having any background in mythology, be like, oh, hey, I know these characters. And the idea of them kind of going on, not living, but like sort of progressing in their character development, so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can get to sort of resolve some of their, long-standing conflicts and heal some traumas. Really satisfying.
Love that.
I was so invested in that particular, and it was also because like it takes probably the longest because like one, Patroclus is a little further in the game, so it takes a while to get to him, provided you even make it that far. And then two, I feel like I ran into Patroclus the least often.
Yeah.
And so I had fewer opportunities to kind of, because you have to sort of have conversations. Then when conversations get to a certain point, then you can give them gifts, and that pushes the metric. So it takes just a lot of runs to sort of advance it. And then like when I finally kind of got that resolved, it was like so satisfying.
Well, and it's interesting to think about because it reminds me a little bit of The Good Place, but also what was very interesting about the Orphic Mystery Cult was that it was not only, I'm pretty sure, I know there's a few different afterlives, but this is one that offered an option of reincarnation as well, I believe.
I'm not allowed to tell you because I'm initiated.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, keep your secrets. And then you forget your old life and you get a chance to start a new one. And one of my favorites is like Odysseus gets this like grand pick of what he could want for his next life. He's like, I just want a simple life as a farmer. I don't need my name to be known. I don't need anything. Just keep it chill this time. And I think that's kind of interesting where we can see the development, and maybe it seemed like death was the end and some of these things would never be resolved, but things can be resolved in the underworld, and then maybe everyone gets a fresh start that way too.
And Achilles in this game is also such like, in many ways, like I said, like informed by Iliadic Achilles or something like that, but he's so like, there's like a maturity to him and a sort of thoughtfulness. And like the kind of thoughtfulness I think that comes out of, maybe someone who acted very rashly and then paid the price for it, but he's very supportive and kind of sort of mentor figure, because the sort of backstory also is he's the one that trained Zagreus and how to fight, and he's kind of like a coach, mentor sort of figure, but also one with his own, one where his expertise and his wisdom is informed by the sort of pain and trauma that he experienced while alive.
Feels like a very different Achilles.
It does.
Yeah.
It's interesting to reflect on where this game sort of exists in myth time, where it feels like Troy was very long ago, but we're still somehow in the middle of the Persephone myth.
Mm-hmm.
That part is unresolved.
Mm-hmm.
It's got this time dilation effect.
And even when you get to sort of towards the later part of the game, like, so we've been kind of hinting at aspects, which is each weapon, there's different kinds of weapons you get, and they have different kind of sub settings for each of them. And then the final aspects for each weapon alludes to an entirely different mythological pantheon and world and something like that. So like the final one for the sword is King Arthur, and the final one for the spear is Guan Yu from the Three Kingdoms romance, and Beowulf for the shield, and Gilgamesh for the and they kind of say that like sort of part of the quest line is to get each of those final aspects to the surface, and then the idea is that those weapons sort of break out into the world so those heroes can later get those weapons to use them. And like there'll be a little dialogue scene when you get to the surface with, say, Excalibur, and Zagreus even hints, he's like, this sword is going to be some kind of king. And then there's that time dilation thing, because like Gilgamesh is like, maybe he's actually already come and gone, and like maybe this is going back in time or something like that. I forget who it is for the gun. I don't know if I've actually gotten that
Lucifer.
far with it.
Ooh.
There's a gun?
Yeah.
Gun is one of my favorites, actually.
What?
So Lucifer shoots laser bolts.
Amazing.
And the special is this sort of ball that radiates energy. And once you get boons, it does really cool things, because if you have Dionysus, the Dionysus special will like radiate hangover energy.
What?
And if you get the Athena attack and the Daedalus hammer upgrade that allows you to shoot continuously, you're just shooting like a ray of deflection ahead of you. It is very effective and fun.
Wow.
I checked back over my set. So apparently, the weapon that I picked the most was the spear, but I have the fewest amount of clears with it, and I'm most successful with the sword. For whatever.
What's your
reason.
favorite sword?
Probably the King Arthur one, I think. The one at the
King
last
Arthur one is you could take a lot of punishment. I do like I like I forget, the second one. The one where after you special, you crit more for a little
Yeah.
while.
I think I used to use that one a lot too. I'm trying
Yeah,
to, it's been a minute.
with a sort of Artemis build.
Mm-hmm.
My highest heat level is with the gloves.
Oh, interesting. I think I'm not that. I'm only at like heat 3 or something like that. Like I'm not that far.
I'm at heat 13 with the gloves.
What?
Yes.
It's okay, Lish. I'm lost too because that's all the stuff Andy dealt with.
Yeah.
It sounds cool.
Ooh, pack your pens and notebooks because Donna's taking us to school.
No, I really like this game. What can I say?
Excellent.
We could all use some escapism.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Truly.
Yeah. Can I talk about a bigger theme? Is that okay, Colin?
We don't like themes on this show. What are you talking about? I hate, you know me, Eli, I hate themes. I hate talking about larger thematic resonances of literature and movies and things like that.
Sounds terrible.
Okay, fine, if you must.
Well, I really liked how this was almost like a reverse of like Demeter and Kore kind of thing. It's like it's Persephone's child, but it's not a girl who's trapped in the underworld, Zagreus, and so it's like some sort of like masculine version of the story, and it's inverted. Like she's not trying to, well, is it inverted? Like that's also something in my head, but it feels like this cool continuation of a familiar theme of like Demeter and Persephone.
You could say it's sort of like a Hellenistic take on
Yes!
the Homeric to Demeter, where it's like
absolutely
it's got that like sequel but reflection with a twist.
Yes, and that I thought was actually really fun and is sort of a use of that myth that I have never seen before. And I feel like there are so many terrible reception-y retellings of Hades and Persephone that I was like, this has I don't know if
No, I absolutely hear you, and we're pretty deep in the spoilers, so now by this point I feel like I could say whatever I want. What I love about this game in terms of storytelling is how they handled the sexual assault aspect.
Yeah.
Which is that, I was really concerned about that because I knew it was coming, obviously.
Yes.
And I didn't want to lose my investment in any of these characters, all of whom I love. And the way, except for, I didn't love Zeus. And the way they did it was really constant with everybody, which was that Persephone didn't like Olympus, wanted to leave. Hades was interested in Persephone. So Zeus was just sort of like, here, and took her and brought her to the underworld. So there is still this act of violence against her and this removal of her agency. It's not really framed as a sexual assault. It seems like the relationship that develops between her and Hades once she gets to the underworld appears to be completely consensual. And she has choice every step of the way there. And she seems to really like the underworld and elements of her existence there. So I thought that handled the story in a way that was true to it while also being extremely elegant and addressing some of the problematic aspects instead of writing around them. Because Hades is then really angry at Zeus for what he's done.
Yeah, and they're still like want to be together. There's still so much of this love in between them, it seems, at the end, which I think is really cool.
And I think an interesting way to think about it too, that hearing Donna talk really just brought a revelation to me, is that the act of taking Persephone to the underworld suddenly, and it's had a huge impact on Demeter and the sadness she feels and like the depression she goes through. It's like, that really is just, what is it like to lose a child suddenly to death? And I'd never really thought about that before, because it always just did come off as a sense of abduction and sexual assault, but like it could be more of a commentary on like the loss of a child when you weren't expecting it. And because they're framing Demeter as someone who's kind of suffocating towards Persephone, like the regret that can go through that too, of just like, I've lost her so suddenly and I realized the relationship wasn't what I wanted it to be. So I think they brought a lot of new interesting elements to it by framing it that way.
They did that so beautifully, I thought. And there's this real mirroring between the two characters, who I believe are actually played by the same voice actor. And where, Demeter responds to her losing her child by cutting off agriculture and bringing this eternal winter, which gives her these cool frost powers that she can give to you. And Persephone instead goes in this other direction, and she creates this tiny garden where everything is growing very abundantly and it's filled with life. Maybe the place that is most filled with life on Earth or in the underworld, it seems, because of what Demeter's done. But they're both really isolating themselves from everybody else.
Yeah, I agree with everything. I think everything. I just like wanted to add, because you anticipated a question. Our good friend Zoe Thomas, who wanted to be here but couldn't because she's organizing a lecture at UT right now, but had a question exactly to what Donna addressed about the sort of how they handled the Persephone myth, and I agree that it's Hellenistic. I would even go as far, and this is, again, I'm more of a sort of Romanist. It's very Ovidian in this approach to myth, where it sort of lives between the myths and the idea, like whenever there's a gap in the story, that's where it builds the story or something like that. And I wanted to segue, because I asked Zoe before we recorded if she wanted to have other questions while we had Donna on, and the other one that's kind of a segue is about what we think, and particularly Donna, but all of us, but what we think about masculinity in this game, and I was thinking particularly of Hades as you were just talking, but Zagreus too, and the way that masculinity is acted out, because as I was thinking, Eli and Christy and I have been talking about a lot of sort of classical reception. It skews towards a very heteronormative, conservative kind of male figure who, only acts out of sort of vengeance or righteousness in defense of harmless people or to get revenge, and there's sort of a certain kind of maleness that you tend to see in both myth, receptions of myth, and sort of other kinds of classical reception, like, something like Gladiator or things like that. And this, to me, is very different.
Yeah, I love this depiction of Hades, where he is a kind of patriarch who I don't think that you see a lot in mythic reception, which is sort of the one who's doing the work. That like every time you see Hades, he's behind his desk handling this giant volume of paperwork. And, you really get the sense that he takes his responsibilities very seriously, which is something that is not always a major characteristic of
Zeus,
gods, of classical gods in general. And I think that that's really interesting, because he's definitely not lacking in authority. Nobody sees him as a sort of middle manager bureaucrat. He has incredible authority and presence, but also just really shows up every day and does his job, which, it's very unusual.
I love that.
I think this game really runs the gamut of depictions of masculinity. They're all super hot. That is the one thing I'll say. Every character in this game is just so attractive.
I will say that, like, Theseus, though, is like, he is bodybuilder attractive in a way that it's not attractive anymore, but he's still trying to live up to the idealized masculine look, versus like Dionysus right there, just chill, like, he looks good. And
no, there's an active decision that, particularly to Gen Z is her name, but she's the artistic head, and she designed, I think, just about all of these characters and the art for them, and I think did a fantastic job. And in this No Clip documentary I was watching, she was talking about how she sort of starts where she gets the idea of the character from the creative director, and then just kind of searches around for, ancient art or vase paintings or something like that, but then isn't necessarily, bound to that idea. And like, I think this art and design really sort of rides that line really well, where there's, all of their attributes and things like Dionysus he's got the thyrsus, he's got the grapes, he's got the things that we would clearly recognize him as being Dionysus, but he also reads to us, I think, very prescient or modern or something like that. And all of the characters are like this.
Is Aphrodite just naked?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
She's got a real Botticelli's Venus thing going on.
So good.
It is very good. Yeah. I mean, I think that seems like a pretty obvious, like what they were going for there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's just wearing hair. But yeah, I mean, for a game that has a lot of sort of winks toward sex, there actually is very little. There's a whole lot of fade to black. And there's never really anything inappropriate in it.
But simultaneously, I would say it's a pretty sex-positive game.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And then there is sort of the possibility, again, we're deep into spoilers, but with sort of polyamorous or depending on how you play the game, but with both Thanatos and Meg, and to a lesser extent, Dusa, who is a character we haven't talked about yet. But
right. I think that, I mean, I do like her the payoff of that storyline where she decides she needs to focus on her career. But yeah, apparently, allegedly you can get a scene where Zagreus and Megara and Thanatos are all talking about their relationship, but I have not seen it yet. And I mean, you talk to them separately about the fact that they're both totally cool with him seeing the other one. And personally, I would say Thanatos is hands down the hottest character in the game.
Yeah, he's just great because like I thought the first time I saw him, like I thought it was a very antagonistic fight. And it's like, no, he's always just been like, all right, whatever, Zag, I'm here to help. And he's actually always like really supportive, even if it's in like a brotherly, like, you aggravate me, but like you're my little brother, so I'm going to take care of you sort of a sitch. But like, yeah, and it goes back to that whole theme of family where so many of these people are Zagreus's adoptive family more than like what his true relatives are. I think speaking to that too, that family is what you make it. And I thought that was a really cool message to come out from this as well.
Yeah. The creators were talking a little bit about the idea for Thanatos that he's almost like a gentle aspect of death, like a sort of easy, or not an easy necessarily, but a sort of like a calm guiding hand that is going to take you down to the House of Hades, as opposed to like scary death or menacing death or something like that. And he does have that. There is a reassurance. I mean, albeit begrudgingly, particularly at the beginning when your early encounters with Thanatos are kind of, there's like a layer of annoyance or something like that. But also like he's also like a deeply dependable character, which is kind of what's so appealing about him. And he has a little bit of that like sort of like Nick Carter, like middle part kind of move going on.
Yeah.
I also think someone was watching Soul Eater, which is an anime, because the scythe has a little eye in the end. It's like, were they watching this old anime called Soul Eater where they have people and they're I forget what Shinigami themselves, and then they have like a partner that turns into their weapon to collect souls, and Scythe is one of the main ones. So it's like, I'm pretty sure someone must have been watching this anime when they designed Thanatos, because it's there. I swear.
He has his hair too. He has a very anime look.
I see it. Yeah. In terms of the masculinity question that we were just thinking about, it just popped into my head that like having a like nice, reliable death character is a very, I would say, like a non-masculine version of death that seems like very calm and not aggressive in any way. That I would maybe, I think like seeing like the images of Ares, who is also like that maybe more aggressive. Does he say something like he's also a student of death, or he says something like that as well?
I like Ares a lot, though. Yeah, I would say in this game, positive masculinity and I mean, just positive character development in general is really about taking your responsibilities seriously. And you know, for the male characters we've been discussing, and ultimately for Zagreus, this game has hands down the most satisfying ending of any roguelike. It is the best because ultimately the best thing that can happen to you in a roguelike is you win and then you start off back at the beginning, right? And I was really worried about what was going to happen, how they were going to keep this premise where, you know, he's trying to escape from the house. And again, we're deep in spoiler land here. You know, it ends up with him where Hades hires him on as a white hat security consultant. And, you know, you're just going to keep breaking out, but now it's your job and you're helping make the underworld a better place. It's so good.
I saw an interview with Greg Kasavin where he talked about specifically that concern, like of all the parts, they were especially concerned about getting the ending right. And he kind of vaguely alludes to like certain TV shows that maybe dominate HBO for a couple of years and then end in a certain way that sort of retroactively, you know, colors people's perceptions of the show as a whole. Not that I don't think this game was really in any great danger of falling into that, but of really getting the ending right. And I think, again, Donna just said sort of perfect, like the genre is you end up at the beginning, and it's almost like in it's like a sort of mythic trope in a lot of ways. Or I'm thinking of the Indian epic that I'm blanking on, but where you basically just come back to your old life but with like a renewed sense of purpose, like Wreck-It Ralph or something like that, where like that's kind of the Wreck-It Ralph arc where like he comes back to his old job, but now he's like, I get why I do this, I am important for doing this, and like this is important, and you know we've built it up.
That's a really good comparison.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
That's my thesis right there. Hades is Wreck-It Ralph. But
Amazing.
I wanted to go off that question a little bit because I was talking to a student today about depictions of Hades because Hades was intentionally demonized in Christianity as part of the transition from paganism to other religions, and he's now having a revitalization that is really portraying him as not that bad of a guy. And I was wondering, like, what do you guys think about that tendency to, especially because the Greeks thought of him, like, they don't speak his name because it's dangerous to do so. And it's like, you don't talk about him. So we barely have any myths about him, even as a result of that. So what do you guys think about finding new ways to portray Hades that aren't just making him a villain out and out?
It is very rare. I think that the one that a lot of people will think of is probably like the Disney Hercules model, which is about as far from this as you could possibly get. And I think that the distance there is in part because we are so lacking in any kind of culturally hegemonic depiction of what Hades should be. So you could sort of do whatever you feel like.
yeah, I think about it a little bit. Like it almost seems like a natural sort of progression of art and storytelling to really want to come back and take a second look at, you know, villains or just characters that get maligned. And sometimes I think it's maybe unwarranted. Like I don't think Nurse Ratched really kind of warrants like a whole series for herself. But on the flip side, like particularly one of my interests sort of broadly is the way we come back to monsters and monstrosity, and the way I think in the last couple of years, especially, I'm thinking Shape of Water as like kind of the pinnacle of this, but really taking a second look at like monstrous characters. And this game does that too with Asterius, the Minotaur, who really gets sort of fleshed out as a character. So I think in one way it sort of seems like a natural arc of sort of storytelling to really want to come back and like, well, like let's really look again at Hades and you know, what is he like, or is he not like, and you know, are we pinning fears on him, or maybe we can see in him this sort of younger brother who kind of does all the work and feels a deep frustration and resentment towards his older siblings who are just kind of coasting along, no pun intended, with Poseidon.
Isn't Hades the oldest brother though? Because Zeus is the youngest. He's the last to
you're
be
right,
born.
Actually. I stand corrected.
Yeah, the youngest, and then the oldest, yeah, and then the first, yeah.
Where
exactly.
the brother that feels sort of resentment for his kind of coasting, or his brothers that go along, and like Donna was saying, the guy who's going to do the work and kind of really is there in a reliable way. And I think I lost my thread, but
I'm sorry.
No, but I think this might be being a little over generous to prescription, but maybe it's just a larger sort of cultural sort of pushback against like a hegemonic, you know, maybe prescriptively Christian worldview or something like that, where the devil and death are bad or something like that. Mm-hmm. But that's purely speculative on my part.
Well, I also think that there has been a bigger trend when you say like Shape of Water, but even before that, like Twilight making vampires sexy and like romanticizing.
Vampires were always sexy.
I mean, yes, obviously, but well, I mean, even further back to like Interview with the Vampire, those were sexy vampires, but they were also inhumanized in so many ways and still very dangerous. And I think that is always a line that really intrigues people. I think of shows like Dexter or Hannibal, where it's like these very, very intriguing, dangerous characters. Like, is Hades still a dangerous god? Probably, yes. But it's like, are we like, who are we supposed to be rooting for? I think it sort of depends on the telling.
But Hades doesn't kill people though, right? I mean, right, Hades doesn't. All Hades is just a manager. He's the one who handles what happens after you die. He's not responsible for any of.
Arguably, the Olympians have more say in who ends up dead than Hades does.
I think, to my knowledge, their body count is considerably higher.
Considerably.
Much.
Yeah. So
I mean, technically Demeter wins, I think, in terms of body count, if she's literally letting everyone die of starvation. So, well, I wonder too if that's just because we've been talking in one of my classes a lot about like acts of mass killing is based on dehumanization. And like I try to make the arguments like we call people who commit atrocities like that, monsters, to make us feel better that like they're not human either. But when we revisit them and we do start to unpack the humanity, it allows us to really consider, yes, it is human to do these most extreme things, and we can't separate ourselves from that. So maybe that's also a little bit of it, is trying to find the humanity to recognize that even all humans are capable of some of the worst things that can happen.
I feel like there's something we're missing, like something big that we have yet to talk about, or someone big.
The Lernian Hydra? Oh, Eurydice. We never really got to her.
Yeah. Orpheus and Eurydice.
There we go. Asphodel. That was it.
Yeah, Asphodel. That's right. Well, first of all, Eurydice is just stunning. That character art. I keep coming back to that and how beautiful everything in this game is. But the way they made her hair is, she has this natural hair, but it's also trees. It's just gorgeous. And oh yeah, we could talk about race in this game. That would be, I think, a big thing that we have not talked about. I think that Eurydice, man, I love running into her. Partially because I think that her bonuses are the best bonuses. Sisyphus gives you kind of boring bonuses because it's still sort of the beginning of your run. That's just like more health, more money. And by the time you get to Patroclus, normally, I mean, for me, it's I often will only choose Patroclus of the two options if I'm
low in a Death Defiance.
Yeah. Exactly that. Yeah. So, but Eurydice has the most fun ones. Ones that upgrade your boons, or I often choose the one that makes future boons have higher rarity.
I just love her singing like that song as you like first walk in, and it's like, oh, this is really pretty. And I to go with just the music in general, like the guitars and everything they had. I spent a summer digging on Crete, and we got to listen to a few like actual musicians from the area performing on traditional Cretan guitars, and I'm like, it was so reminiscent of that, and that was a really cool subtle aspect to the game of like, oh, this is actually what I would hear in Greece music wise if it was like modernized in some level. And I thought, yeah, going to her space every time is like, I tell Andy, it's like, can you just go take a break for a minute and let me enjoy the singing?
I love that song, and I love Orpheus' take on it, which you get later on, and then much later you hear the two of them singing it as a duet together.
And just the Orpheus basically openly says like, Eurydice wrote like a lot of my songs, or like she is not just like the muse, but like she wrote the song.
Yeah, but didn't get any credit for it.
Orpheus he's a lot of fun too. I mean, he's just kind of his like he's so like wraith-like almost. He's so kind of like he's like wasting away, and his sadness also is also very like, when you first get him in the court, he doesn't want to play, and it's hard almost for me to articulate sort of, because I just kind of like, I keep coming back to like, yeah, I like this, it's all good, and I'm trying to like find something more intelligent.
It's so much easier to be critical and to have that sharp critical lens on things when you're talking about why they're bad.
Yeah.
When there's something that you love, you're just like, yes, I just love what they did here. Everything here just speaks to me. It's my jam.
Well, we could talk about race, because I think I was so surprised when Athena popped up, and she's black, right?
Black Athena. That was so cool.
I was like, awesome. Yes. There seems to be just so much diversity. Just everybody is a little bit different in a way that seems so realistic.
That got a lot of press when the game came out, and I thought that everybody at Supergiant handled it very well, which was to be like, yeah, of course. Just to not treat it like it was a big deal or a huge choice that they were making.
Yeah.
And I believe that what they said was that these are the Greek gods, not because they are ethnically Greek, but because Greece is where they were worshipped. And we know that a lot of these gods were imported from various other places, and it absolutely makes sense for many of them to look,
But just the variations of people like ran an entire spectrum, which is so cool.
I thought that was really interesting and bold. Having just like specifically Black Athena, right, is a bold and in your face choice about how you're going to engage with race.
And the fact that it's not commented, like in the game, it's not commented. It's just like, oh, I know, like, and that's just it. You know exactly who it is based on all of the actual things that you would use to identify the gods, like the Thyrsus with Dionysus. It's like, skin color was never going to indicate to you who someone was. It was their other aspects. And I think that goes unsaid. And the same with Troy Fall of a City. It's like, you know who Achilles is once he starts fighting and whooping on everyone. Like, that doesn't matter.
There's, I don't know if either you follow, but there was a sort of maybe a hubbub, I guess, for lack of a better word. But so there was recently a trailer for the new God of War game, and then there was sort of towards the end of a trailer, there was a reveal that one of the characters, I think it's Angerbroda from Norse mythology, and then she's a black character. And as you can imagine, people made a stink on the internet, and then the creators were like, nobody looked twice when the giant snake talked, or there was a dwarf who was blue. And it's very telling when like appeals to sort of authenticity, which is sort of in many ways when we're talking about myth is a laughable concept because it's all sort of, carte blanche, like you can do whatever you want. It's myth. That's the whole point. It's your playground, play in it. And appeals to authenticity tend to only get rolled out to further some kind of like white supremacist angle or something like that. But I think this game does a wonderful handling of it, where it in a way that it's almost like unquestioned. Like I don't question, or why would I question what any of these characters look like? Because it all just feels so natural and lived in, and it works so well in the game as a whole.
Something that you said, Donna, back at the very beginning of our conversation was just the kind of joy and amusement or just happiness that sort of goes into the use of mythology here. I really, really enjoy, as I feel like it would be so easy to take this like in a very dark, serious, gritty, sad way. And there are certainly like very, dark and serious tropes through this, but I also really appreciate just like the kind of joy that obviously comes through in these characters.
Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons why I bounced off initially. It was because I thought it was going to have that gloominess to it. And I also wasn't sure initially what to make of the soundtrack, although it really grew on me. But initially I was like, whoa, this is a lot. The sort of hard rock as you are fighting, through hell. But, we're talking about my first run with his escape, where one of the things that turns me off the most in video games is a sort of just like gloominess. And it might be because of gestures vaguely all around that I want to have an element of brightly colored escapism and joy, and to have things really fall together in a really satisfying way, right? That's why we play games in part, I think, is they're these manufactured worlds where you can make things click.
And tell myths.
Yeah. So when I saw what they were really doing and how fun and joyful it was, that totally changed my feeling about it.
I mean, that might be the note to end on. Unless we've got Donna's like, let me the hell out of here.
No, it is such a delight to be able to come in and talk about something that I love doing and that makes me happy, because I feel like I think I've only been on podcasts before talking about white supremacists and their use of classic.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure gets very,
it's a real bummer. This is probably the first podcast I've been on, at least in a long time, where nobody's asked me how to solve the problem of internet toxicity or like the radicalization of young men online. And it's like, if I had the answer for that, don't you think I would have already told people? I think I've been saving it for this podcast.
I do legitimately want to know how to get to Heat 13 though, because I've yet to crack that.
Okay, I mean, definitely. Like, I feel like getting through those early Heat, or getting to the end, switching to Stubborn Defiance really helps. But then switching back to Death Defiance, and having the 3 Death Defiances really helps. I have a strong preference for Fated Persuasion over Fated Authority, the one where you can re-roll the boons that they offer instead of re-rolling what the room reward is. Yeah.
All right.
Time to waste.
I think you're like 2 seconds away to just being like, get good.
No, I don't know that.
Yeah, we'll have to update you on all of our progress
for sure
when I actually start playing.
Anytime you want to send me a message, like I just had an incredible, Artemis Zeus or whatever run. Hard to even imagine this too, but yeah, I would love to hear it.
We got to come back for this Eli Plays Hades for the first time Twitch
right?
run.
Most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to Eli.
Yeah. Dying is just going back home. That's all it
Exactly.
is. And you pet the
It's true.
puppy and
It's
it's
true.
fine.
I'm gonna pet the puppy a
Yeah,
lot.
and like letting Megra kick your ass a few times really
Mhm.
improves your
Love it.
relationship with her.
Mhm.
So I know I said before that Thanatos is the hottest, but she is. She's
Mhm.
definitely the
She's
hottest.
so gorgeous.
It's tough. I skew slightly towards Camp Megara for it's the voice acting, I think, particularly that does it, where she just says something and it's like, ugh.
But her flirting style also, I just Yeah.
Maybe that's also part of it. It's a tad aggressive, if that's your thing.
I love a good frenemy or lovers to enemies. I don't know what the mashup
It's
word.
kind of both. It's both and. I
Yeah,
think.
both and.
yeah, rivals.
A little
Rivals,
BDSM with
lovers, yeah.
the whip in the background. Just like, I loved all the little subtle BDSM jokes going on too. It's like, yes, talk about the whip some more.
Donna, thank you so much for coming to talk to us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yeah, this is so fun. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk about this game.
Yeah.
Well, Donna, if people want to find you or read more by you on the internet or elsewhere, where can they look?
Goodness, I'm not writing that much for the internet right now. I'd been considering writing about video games, which is partially why I started getting back into Hades. I'd been considering writing an essay about why I was shocked that Hades was not my jam. And then when I was like, okay, but I'm going to have to give Hades a little more of a try before I write this. And then, shocker, it was my jam. But I am working on a book, but it will not be out for a long time. So I guess just find me on Twitter at Donna Zuck.
Thanks for joining us, you guys, on this episode of Movies We Dig. Be sure to rate us on iTunes and Spotify, Amazon, all the places where you can find your podcasts. Thanks, guys.
Excellent. Thank you again, Donna.
Thanks,
Bye.
Donna.
Bye.
Thank you.